Hi, everybody. Welcome. We're just going to give it another minute or two to see if some more folks join us. Okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Looks like our numbers are starting to stabilize a little bit, so I think we can get started. Just to let you know, we are going to be recording these sessions, this session, and all the recordings from the GW4 Open Research Week will be available on the GW4 YouTube. So we have the great honor of sort of concluding the week, and we're going out with a bang today to talk about sort of hidden ref and sort of non-traditional outputs and how we might evaluate those. And so I would like to introduce our speaker, which is Ola Thompson. She's very kindly stepped in for Gemma Derrick, who I'm afraid couldn't make it today. But we're very excited to have her. And I will let her introduce herself more fully, and we can get stuck in and hear more about the hidden ref and what the future of that looks like.
Thank you very much, Alice, and I'm so glad to be here with you today. And I'm sending apologies from Gemma, who unfortunately couldn't make it, but I can give you the full picture of what we're doing at the HiddenREF nevertheless. I hope you enjoy this talk, and I hope that inspires you to maybe produce some non-traditional outputs, but certainly, be more sensitive to this space, and we can take it forward into our initiatives and how you can get involved. So I'm a senior research associate at the HiddenREF and the ETI project. So the ETI project is the funded kind of sister project of the HiddenREF. It's embedding trust and evaluation. So the ETI acronym stands for that. And this project is funded by Research England, and it's funded until 2030, so it's quite a long stretch of time for us. But then we've got a lot of work to do, and I'm going to tell you exactly what we're doing. So if I share my presentation now, there we go. I hope you can see it. Please let me know if you can't see it. Yes, you can see it. Perfect. So just a quick one, some credits to not only Gemma Derrick, who's the PI on this, but also Simon Hetrick and James Baker, who are both based at University of Southampton. And this project is a kind of collaboration between the two universities. So they're very much there in the background. Okay. So the whole premise and the credo of the project is that if we don't recognize everyone who is vital to research, we limit our ability to conduct research and conduct excellent research. So we are we're shifting the focus from the superstar researchers, from the superstar academics who are normally at the forefront, at the coalface of research and the impact that they're making within the academic community, and trying to open this up and recognize that behind all these people are a crowd of supportive staff, professional staff, experts who are kind of preparing the ground for excellent research to take place, and we need to recognize them. And the best place to recognize these people is, of course, in the ref, because I don't know how much you know about the ref. I'm sure you know something about the ref, whether you're passionate about the ref as much as we are. I'm not sure if that's the case. You know, Gemma calls herself the ref geek, and I think we're slowly becoming that too, just because we have to, but it actually becomes more and more interesting, and you start reading about it and you interact with people and talk to people about it, how important it is and how impactful it is on the research culture. So the research, so just to very quickly tell you a little bit about the REF, it's the UK's national exercise to assess and evaluate research excellence, and it takes place every 7 years. And it's very impactful because it means that it's decided who gets the £2 billion, how it's distributed across the different higher education institutions. So it's a massive task to undertake. It costs a lot of money. It costs about £470 million every time we do this. And therefore, it is very important. It's important that we get it right. It's important we get it right because the money comes from our taxpayers, and we need to make sure that we nudge the right kind of research, that we reward the right kind of research and the people that participate in it. And therefore, we've identified this as the great place to start shifting that change, institutional change and cultural change. So very quickly, a reminder what's in a submission, although I'm sure that some of you know this very well. So there are 4 different disciplinary panels, A, B, C, and D, and they have their own narrower sub-panels. There are 32 of those, and we call them the units of assessment, which is basically a sub-discipline. Now, the REF submission consists of 3 parts, and if you've been listening to what's been happening in this space, there's been some change around the 3 modules. So now we've got the contributions to knowledge and understanding, which is the CKU. It contributes to 55% of the overall submission, and that's where we've got our research outputs. Okay, so these are journal articles, our book chapters, all those things that and not only those things that academics and researchers are producing that going into that module. We also have 20% going into the research environment, so it's everything about the now updated, not PCE, people, what was it? People, see, and environment. Well, culture, people, culture, and environment. That's it. They've dropped the culture. So now we've got strategy, people, and research environment, and 25% is about the research impact, and this is the social impact of research. So in our project, we're mostly interested in the 55% of the research outputs. So this is our focus. However, this is also about people, and the people will be sitting in the module of SPRE now it's called. So you might have noticed that when researchers talk about their research and what they produce, they very often just talk about their books, articles, chapters, maybe papers that they submit in the conference. However, the REF actually supports and actively encourages, and that was in the previous REF, 22 different research output types. So this is actually really mind-blowing. If you look at the different allowed outputs, and the diversity of them and the beauty of them, really, when you look at that. So how much is possible? And yet we are quite narrowly focused on the first 6 or 7, let's say, categories of research outputs because they're so ingrained in the research ecosystem. This is what we know best, and the rest really is quite obscure, maybe in some disciplines less so, but we don't think of I don't know, software or data sets or exhibitions as something that naturally lends itself to being categorized as a research output. Now, if you look at the REF 2021 statistics, you don't have to be particularly eagle-eyed to see that out of the submissions to the previous REF exercises, really it is the journal articles that are reigning supreme here. So they're in very high 90s in terms of percentages. And when you look at not non-text driven or based publications, the numbers and the percentages are extremely small. So we've got 11 software outputs. Gosh, how can that be possible? I think that might be this particular statistic, I think might be coming from actually from a university, a particular university. But this graph on the right shows you the massive difference between the popularity of those outputs. And Simon Hetrick, who is our principal investigator on it, has got a passion of trying to sort of reflect and show you this skewness, this difference between the different outputs. So he likes to compare it to different things. And here we've got the height. So if the publications are the Burj Khalifa, then the exhibitions are a typical UK house, and the software is a matchbox standing on its side. Or if the publications are a blue whale weighing 120,000 kilograms, then the exhibitions are a rhinoceros, and the software is a dachshund. Okay, so the reason for us is really to, one, identify the problem and then try and tackle this problem and change the culture around producing research outputs. So we think from conversations with the stakeholders, but also from reading around what is out there produced in terms of research about institutional attitudes towards risk. We've come to a conclusion that the problem lies in a lack of evidence around how well non-traditionally submitted outputs, because that's how we like to call them, how well they are evaluated, whether it's worth submitting a non-traditional output as opposed to just submitting a journal article or book chapter or a book, because it's safer to do so, because at the end of the day, those choices make a difference in terms of being funded, in terms of being appraised and evaluated positively and getting the money or not getting the money. So this is around this institutional risk aversion and how open they are to taking those risks, to being open-minded, to trying to experiment with different research outputs and how well they do in the REF. So at the moment, because we haven't got a lot of evidence, they're not prepared to do that as well as they could be. That's why we're trying to build evidence behind this. Another aspect of the problem is the social aspect. So there isn't a lot of experience and therefore guidelines developed for evaluating non-traditional outputs. And this comes from developing these kinds of rules of thumb, which have a fancy word, and that's heuristics. So when you think about journal articles, you might be able to very quickly establish what looks good and what looks bad. So you'll be looking subliminally at maybe the ranking of the journal, you'll be looking at how many citations it's attracted, and the prestige of the journal generally. And so those kinds of rules of thumb and heuristics don't exist, exist but are not very well embedded into non-traditional outputs. And this might be because there's just so many of those non-traditional outputs. So we've identified lots of barriers to change. So we know that institutions are risk averse because of money, and particularly now, the kind of precarious financial situation across many different universities. Some are impacted worse than others. There's no guidance on how to evaluate non-traditional outputs. Therefore, universities don't know how to best present non-traditional outputs because they just don't know how they're going to be looked at. And there are also diffuse audiences when it comes to non-traditional outputs. So when you think about an exhibition, for example, now, are you going to look at the exhibition's impact based on the research and academic impact? Or are you going to look at the social impact of an exhibition and how it's engaged the local community or the public more broadly? So they're quite different diffuse audiences where performance might look brilliant amongst the public engagement for those purposes, but not so much for disciplinary peers and experts. Okay, so we've got this kind of confusion around what is good around performances, exhibitions, artifacts, products that might carry some professional, practical value. So there are different alternative value logics, as we put it. And then using the developed guidelines in the REF that are mainly developed around journal articles and books and book chapters, applying them to NTOs can potentially produce negative outcomes for the non-traditional output. And then what we need to do is try and develop new guidelines to help people, to help peer reviewers, evaluate them, but also prepare researchers into how to present the output for submission. So there are kind of two objectives for this. And to prevent at all costs from evaluators falling back on those analogical heuristics. So asking, well, what's the journal equivalent for something that's like a data set or software? So this could really distort judgment because people haven't got those rules of thumb or those cognitive clutches to hold on to. So we've recognized that there's an awful lot of work to do around this, and this is not going to be easy. And the whole idea to do this really comes from this grassroots movement of people who were very invested in particularly software, research software to help researchers analyze data, collect data, and make the most out of it. So it was launched in 2019 initially as a volunteer activity. It gained a lot of traction through the HiddenREF competitions that we've had, 2 competitions in 2021 and 2024. We're having one this year. And the HiddenREF competition is all about allowing people in the research community to showcase their non-traditional research output. So anything that is in a journal article or book or a book chapter, and really celebrating the diversity and the impact those kinds of outputs create, and yet they are not recognized adequately in the REF. They're not celebrated within individual institutions are readily because institutions are more focused on the carrot, which is the REF. We also have the festival of the HiddenREF where we bring people together and, really not only celebrate the competition, but also talk about the problems, the challenges and solutions, how we can make this easier, how we can improve the research ecosystem around non-traditional outputs and the hidden roles. And there was so much activity happening that in 2025, Research England recognized all the efforts going into this and the appetite of the community for change, that they decided to fund us for the 5 years in line with the REF timeline, which is at the moment 2029 as the next one. So this is our committee, and it's both the HiddenREF committee and the ETI, so Embedding Trust and Evaluation Committee. We're working together across different institutions and organizations, so it's really nice to have people, even independent researchers and consultants involved into that, to have a really broad reach and encourage voices from all places. And these are our supporting organizations. And we're really pleased that we have them on board, because they do, hearing that they feel that change is needed is very reassuring, but also they give us that additional sense of motivation and credibility that these people are behind us and working with us. So our work, especially here at Bristol, is focusing on collecting evidence. So this is the ETI part of the project, where we are reviewing existing evidence, and I can tell you that now there isn't a lot of evidence out there, and we're collecting information, both conducting research, but also collecting information from expert groups and our community about the recognition of non-traditional outputs and assessment, and trying to create this confidence in the community to produce non-traditional outputs and then submit them in the knowledge that they will be assessed and evaluated fairly. Another thing we are doing, and this is together with Southampton, is we're running a non-traditional output workshops. So we're usually invited by HEIs to come on their campuses and deliver some hands-on experience of assessing non-traditional outputs. So if you're interested in that, please feel free to reach out. So it's a bit of it's not so much training on how to do, because we don't know exactly how to do that yet. This is why the project is happening. But we're gathering intelligence from all sorts of stakeholders to inform where the gaps are and what's needed, but also giving people in the workshops the kind of feel of what that evaluation looks like. So what kinds of criteria evaluators are looking at, and what sort of material they are accessing to evaluate an NTO. What's also quite exciting is that we're just kicking off our expert groups, who will help us in the impossible task of writing accessible guidelines for NTO assessment. So we're going to bring in people who are experts in databases, experts in software, experts in exhibitions or artifacts or devices, who can sit with us and we can together come up with standardized to an extent guidelines around evaluating them. I'm saying standardized to an extent because there has to be a degree of flexibility to allow for different disciplinary expectations. So the guidance has to be both robust and standardized in some way, but flexible in other ways. So that's what I'm saying, that it's a very difficult task to achieve. But we are very, very excited as this is happening this year, and we can hope, and we do hope, that this guidance will then feed into the REF 2029 assessment. We also are trying to raise awareness of this kind of hidden space. And this is through our articles and podcasts and talks. And we're constantly liaising with Research England to make sure that we are kind of meeting also their needs, because they're the ones who are conducting the REF. And so we need to make sure that we are kind of singing from the same hymn sheet, that there are no surprises. We don't want to burden the community for this REF exercise coming up in 2029 with some new guidelines that no one is able to implement because it's too late. It's halfway through the preparation period. So we're just gathering at the moment as much as we can, and hope that in the future REF exercises we'll have something very, very tangible and solid to embed that trust in the NTO evaluation in the future. And if you would like to get involved, there are many ways to do this. So I've already mentioned the competition, and the competition is actually a really lovely way to showcase something that you might have hidden in your desk drawer that you can't really get out because no one wants to submit it to the REF, but you've got it there and it's made an impact. So hey, why not, dig it out and submit it to the competition. You can also get involved in evaluating submissions in the competition. So please let us know if you feel that you would like to do that and you've got the expertise to do that. We also run a community calls and expert groups that I mentioned previously. So expert groups, very quickly, this is our link to the website. Everything is on the website, so it's pretty intuitive. You can help us write guidance. This will be happening in the next few months. This is the HiddenREF competition coming up. It's launching in May, so that's very soon. And the submission deadline is mid-September. And we have award ceremony in November 2026. And our podcasts are also quite regular. I think we publish something at least once a month. There are various topics, not just the REF, but anything kind of research ecosystem related we end up talking about, and the news that happens that you might be interested in. We also organize community calls every second month where people can come in. There's no restriction on anything. There's a rough topic, for example, research culture, where people can come and vent about the problems that they're having, or the solutions that they might bring with them. So I really encourage that, because it's quite an interesting and safe space to talk about research for an hour. And sometimes, we wish we booked it for 2 hours because people have so much to say. So that's definitely something to get involved in. And so, this is it pretty much about the HiddenREF. I'm sure there will be some questions perhaps. If you want to get involved in any shape or form, or we would like us to run an NTO workshop, then reach out and we'll be able to offer you something and get you involved in a way that suits you best, and make use of your expertise if you can. So that's it. So thank you very much for that.
Oh, brilliant. Thanks so much, Ola. For those of you in the group here, do feel free to submit some questions via the Q&A, and we can ask Ola. But I'm happy to sort of start us off with a question while everyone thinks of their questions. So I guess I sort of have two thoughts. So first, I was really struck, as someone who works in the sort of open data publication side of things. Data in some ways, research, like sharing research data, publishing research data, in some ways, of all of those outputs that were listed, kind of can almost be sort of evaluated in a similar way to publications in so much as they can be cited and you can talk about how many times people cite it and you can see how many downloads there are, which is almost a proxy for citation in a way, a loose one. And even then, like something like that, which seems like it would have an easier time being evaluated, is still just absent from the ref submissions, which I was really shocked by those statistics that you shared.
Yeah, it is absolutely shocking. And I think a lot is to do with the infrastructure. So there are maybe like pockets of really good infrastructure for databases and software and all sorts of other things, but there's no one kind of overarching hierarchy of prestige of that. So a lot of it is lost in various different places, and people can't really make sense of what's important and what isn't important. Are downloads really important? Does this mean that it's been meaningfully engaged with, or does it mean that it's just been downloaded? So we're maybe questioning things that we should be questioning with journal articles in the same way, right? And yet we're not, and we are kind of trying to build something that is long lasting and that everyone in the research community can buy into, because different disciplines also have different standards and expectations. So what might work in one discipline will not work so well in another when we're talking about a different research output. Whereas for journal articles and books, it's much easier and simpler. It can be, although sometimes there are nuances there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we've got a question from Veronica Cano. I'll just read that out. At the University of Edinburgh, I've run a pilot exercise for diverse research outputs in a couple of our UOAs to identify challenges and opportunities for authors and reviewers. When reviewing a diverse output, disciplinary experts felt they didn't know enough about the format to review it, but, quote, type experts felt they didn't know enough about the subject. A bit of a
Mm,
catch-22. Have you come
yeah.
across this issue, and what would be your recommended approach?
This is such a brilliant comment. I love this. Veronica, thank you so much, because we ran some experiments actually last year with assessing non-traditional outputs. And this is exactly what we're hearing, that there are people who are disciplinary experts, but they just simply don't know how to look at a product or an artifact, because they just don't feel comfortable doing this. And yet, if you bring in an expert in that particular format, then they lack the confidence and knowledge around the subject. So there are different ways to tackle it. So far in the panels, in the ref panels, we've got panels deliberating around the units of assessment, and then if there is a non-traditional output, they bring in an expert of the output into this. The problem with that is that it's usually one person. Okay, so the safety and numbers of the people who are thinking much more traditionally and much more conventionally around the sort of traditional heuristics around journal articles, we've got a real skew between those two different categories of reviewers. And people like this who just come in as a one-off expert might feel slightly marginalized. They might feel that their voice is somehow not heard. Um, but we don't know exactly what's happening behind the scenes, right? Because no one gets the insight into those processes behind the scenes. Now, one way of doing things would be to turn it on its head and start assessing different diverse outputs in clusters and bringing disciplinary experts to come in and then provide that um, expertise into the format. But there are some criticisms around that as well, because then you kind of maybe running the risk of othering assessment of non-traditional outputs. So there are the traditional outputs and there are the non-traditional outputs. So we also want to avoid that. We want to avoid any kind of two-tier, two-stream situation where one is seen as the prestigious one and the other one is not so prestigious. So it's a very difficult question, Veronica, and we are working on it. So we'll be working with expert groups to ask them, what's their advice, what's their recommendation, and try and over the next 4 years come up with something sensible.
Great. Yeah. Someone just said in the chat, I like the term coined by Liverpool, which is diverse output types.
Yes, that's it. That was a big debate that we had actually a few months ago when it all started. How do we call these things? The research outputs, they are diverse, but they're also non-traditional. We didn't want to call them non-traditional outputs. We actually started calling them something like really long, which is the non-traditionally submitted output, because it's non-traditionally submitted. It's kind of othered because it's not submitted. It's being produced, but it's not being recognized. So there are different ways indeed of naming of the conventions. But I think we've settled in the project on this one.
Yeah, very interesting. We have another question. This is from Kate Eric Page. When looking at the list of supporters that was showed earlier, there seemed to be a variety of supporters who came from different backgrounds. For example, publishers, funders, commercial, non-commercial. Have you noticed these supporters coming with different motivations for supporting the HiddenREF?
Yeah, I would say so. I think there are different nuances of different interests. And you can definitely see that, commercial, non-commercial. You could say that there is an element of that. And I would say also that we've been approached by organizations that are commercial that are very keen to get involved. We're not sure whether to do this yet because they're trying to get into this, I guess, a market gap, right? So we're trying to be careful in managing that and making sure that we have as many different supporters from as many different backgrounds, because we are all one big research ecosystem with different actors. And we have to do this well to be on the side of the community and the grassroots, because that's where the project has come from. But at the same time, you recognize that there has to be a robust and reliable infrastructure in place that is credible, that can help us deliver that promise to the community. So that's why we need all sorts of different stakeholders together with us to support the whole thing, which will eventually feed into the REF. And we know that the REF relies on various different infrastructures and systems, commercial, non-commercial, in place to function.
Yeah, excellent. I have one more question, so I'll give other folks some time to submit some more questions if they like. But yesterday we had a great session about reward and recognition in the GW4 Open Research Week, and it struck me that being top of mind, having just happened, how in some ways the reward and recognition movement is trying to sort of gain that recognition within institutions, and the HiddenREF is in a way trying to gain recognition for similar types of things through the ref. And I was wondering if you had deeper and better thoughts about how the relationship between the HiddenREF and these non-traditional outputs sort of works with that movement for reward and recognition that is happening within institutions to try and like build it into job descriptions and promotions, that kind of thing.
That's an excellent question, Alice, and something that comes out from our competition, from our HiddenREF competition. So in some cases, we had winners in the competition actually for their hidden roles, which were supporting roles or professional services roles, but also non-traditional outputs, where by being showcased and celebrated through the HiddenREF and taking part in the competition, they have gained substantial recognition within their own institutions. and they have not only gained recognition, but they have gained career progression and real prestige and credibility in their research communities. So I think it's a lovely springboard for that wider, unhidden, open ref and recognition that is potential here. So I think that if we do this right, we'll be able to foster and promote more of those kinds of cases where people suddenly feel, thank goodness, I've been working my socks off on this. I haven't been recognized so far, but now I am because someone else has recognized me externally, which actually can paradoxically boost the internal recognition and whether that will feed into job descriptions and promotion criteria and recruitment criteria, it hopefully will at some point trickle down if there is real buy-in from the HEIs around that.
Yeah, and actually, like your point about the sort of research supporters, often, there's conversations that I've been hearing, here at Bath and across other places around whether or not institutions have a mechanism to support non-academics for gaining grants, or like if there's internal processes. And again, recognizing that there are people who support and do research that may not be officially sort of recognized as researchers.
Yes, yes, yes. So this is happening, and the change has happened. So now you can submit. Anyone can submit to the ref. Any staff could submit to the ref. There are some string attached to it, or you have to have some research aspect written into your contract. But even if you don't, you can contact the ref, and they can look at this situation on a case by case basis. So there's a definite positive change happening already.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. Really interesting. Any other questions from the audience? I might ask one more quick question, just
Yeah,
like a
sure.
uh, sort of in your dream scenario, what
There.
what like, what would the outcome of all of this look like?
Well, when I was being interviewed for this job, um, Gemma, who interviewed me, she said, "Well, we hope that we'll become obsolete in 5 years." And I said to her, "Well, yes, that's exactly right. You want the impact of the project be so great that you've changed the system, you've changed institutions, you've changed the appetite and the risk aversion, you've minimized the risk aversion towards NTOs, and we're disbanded because we're not needed anymore. So that should be my dream. But then I'll be talking myself out of the job in my dream." So I think that realistically, this time between now and REF 2029 is doing some extensive work around evidence preparation and helping to raise awareness around HEIs around that. But I think there'll be inevitably, maybe not, I'm not an optimist, but that there'll be more work to do because, like I said earlier, we can't force, there's no time to now force HEIs to start really prioritizing or bundling a lot of NTOs regardless into the REF 2029 because those guidelines are still being developed. And I think the next REF might be the one that where we can really can say we've made an impact.
Yeah, it does feel like the tide's changing, which is great. Um, all right, I'll do one last call if anyone has another question. And while you're thinking, I'll just read a lovely comment from Claire Drake who said, "Thank you so much, HiddenREF team, for the work you do in promoting all the research that academics do that doesn't result in a journal article." And I
Yeah.
can only heartily agree. Absolutely, Claire.
Thank you so much. That's so nice to hear.
Yeah.
And I think that maybe it's also about encouraging early career researchers into thinking differently. So I delivered a talk to the British Academy Early Career Researcher Network recently, and I think that's the generation that we also need to be really nurturing in terms of other things are possible. You don't just have to focus on journal articles, but that's also kind of a dangerous advice, isn't it, right? Because these people are concerned about their careers and the trajectory of the future in academia. So we have to be careful in giving any advice like this to anybody. So journal articles are super important. They fulfill a really significant role in the community. But then let's have some space for other types of outputs and maybe think more differently about, if I've produced an article and I've got a choice between producing a second article or something else like an exhibition or a website, why not give it a go and see where it takes you? So having both, I think, is the right strategy. But also those who are at the, later stages of their careers, I think they could really help us in leading by example. And because they established enough to be able to take risks, and are forgiven if they fail. So I think if we find people who are more senior, who are also leading by example and are role modeling that other outputs are possible, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. Claire Drake has just asked, is there a PGR strand in the HiddenREF competition?
There isn't one, and it's open to everybody. But it's an interesting question actually that we could consider if it's felt that that would be helpful. But at the moment, we don't stream early career or postgraduate research or later career at all. It's open to everything, everyone, anything goes, as long as it's
Fantastic.
not a research article or book chapter that you're submitting.
It's really literally the only competition probably where that's the case.
Yes.
That's fantastic. Okay, great. Well, I think unless there's anything else anyone wants to say, I think we can bring this to a close. And I just wanted to say thank you again so much, Ola, for a really interesting presentation and some great sort of challenges to traditional sort of ideas and also just a reminder to everyone that all of the GW4 sessions have been recorded and will be available on the GW4 Open Research, the GW4 YouTube page. And it's worth catching up on all of those great recordings. And thank you again, Ola, for closing us out, giving us a wonderful sort of end note to look forward to the future. And
So
all
thank you so much. And I really do hope that you can get involved in some way or another. There's so many different ways to do so. And I hope to see you soon again at some point.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.